Let's draw a human face, and then slap it on a fish. Well, hello there, I'm Détroit. Human faces are hard to draw. Subscribe if you agree. The plan here today is to practice drawing a coherent human face. I need a face that makes sense. This is very much how it is to draw a face, right? Sometimes in 3 brush strokes you manage to draw a good face, and sometimes you struggle for half an hour and it still looks janky. This is why practice is important. Carve in your memory how the lines mix with each other to make a face. The relationship between the lines are what's important in my opinion. No line is independent. It makes sense for the bottom lip and the upper lip to be mutually dependent, but upper lip and nose go together. Then nose and eyes go together, then eyebrows with them, etc. The more you understand how all of these work together, the easier it gets. For example, you could draw a killer mouth, nose and eyes, each coherent with the next, but due to the very nature of lines to represent a full face, one nose orientation could work with slight variations of eye orientations. But combined with the mouth, the eyes seem weird because they are not oriented exactly the same way. I'm not sure what I'm saying makes sense, but in my mind it does. And the result is very hard to implement. That's the crux of this drawing. I just want to draw a good face for once. One thing I have to say that is important is that I am not working solely from memory on here. I am of course using reference. Before even creating the Photoshop document, I had a picture in mind of what the full illustration would be. I knew I wanted to draw a human-faced fish and I knew the angle I wanted to be at. I also wanted a nondescript face of a middle-aged human with a very neutral expression and eyes closed. I think this drawing is right in between male and female face, which is completely fine for what I want it to be. Back to the reference I'm using, because of the angle and the neutral expression, I actually turned to screenshots of the movie Watchmen for this. I used Dr. Manhattan's face for inspiration. Due to his character, he is always very neutral in his expression, and that's what I wanted. He also has no facial hair whatsoever, which worked for me. You have to remember that this face goes on a fish. Fish don't need facial hair because hair and water don't work that good. I challenge you to find me a hairy fish, which by the way could be a really good drawing prompt for a future. Anyway, because it's a human face, I still added the semblance of eyebrows, or rather I'll erase the current eyebrows later. They're not quite there. There are no eyelashes either. I am also pushing the lips a little bit, more than I would have for a human face on a human. Fish notoriously have big bulky lips, and in my idea, this fish would have pursed lips. To transition from human to fish, I straight up cut the face like it was a mask slap on a fish. I like the brutal change between the two, and that's how I imagined it, rather than a smooth transition between both parts of this creature. To get a cool drawing from this sketch, I decided to not really do some line art, but rather slowly turning my sketch into the line art. With the nature of the sketch, you tend to get used to having multiple lines on screen, and it looks good, but tracing only one line on top makes it weird. To simplify that, I'm slowly erasing and retracing each part to find the right balance. It also makes for more interesting inking because the line width will vary more this way, but I'm still using the same brush. This is what I would call a semi-realistic line art, maybe? It's not exhaustive in the sense that the lines aren't necessarily complete. Even on the outline of the face, there are white spaces. This gives such dynamism to your line work, and it makes it more realistic than if you were to draw the whole line. Your brain doesn't need the full line to know it's there, and it can interpolate between 2 half lines on its own. In fact, it's even more realistic than a full line art because a real face simply doesn't have lines. So to resume my approach, I'm only drawing what's needed to understand the features. I'm not really drawing the features themselves. Of course, it also saves a lot of time to not redraw a full line art but to refine the sketch into it. While I was talking, I also sketched the fish body and shaped the sketch into line art as well. After drawing a full human face that is by no means perfect but at least it works, it is very refreshing to draw a fish. With big shapes that can go anywhere, it's like 10 times easier to make the lines make sense. You can note that I am not drawing lines anywhere other than on the fish. This is the focus of my image, and since the line art is semi-realistic, the shading will also be. Having line art crowding the background will only make you lose focus on the main element, the fish, and so the background will be completely lineless. I start the coloring by trying out different color palettes. I want the face to be flesh colored, but the scene still takes place underwater, so it won't be as red and orange as expected, rather turning a bit greenish. I first paint over an entire layer with the background color and the fish color, then play a bit with curves to find the right colors. Unfortunately, these don't please me very much, so I'm going to start over, this time delving into pinks and purples for the fish, to contrast with the mostly desaturated green background. Once the color pattern is found, I can start painting properly. Because I have a line art, the edges are well defined, so I'm using a hard round brush to make a flat layer over which I'll then paint with my clipping masks. You can still see the color palette at the top left of the canvas, where I put my previous sketchy color layers in a small size. Once all the flats are in, and by that I just mean the face and the body of the fish, I start rendering the skin a little bit. At this point, I don't know why I used my painting brush to render instead of a soft round brush. It would have been much better and smoother from the beginning, but oh well, mistakes happen. I can still make it soft later with the Gaussian blur properly adjusted. For the shading, I first do a pass with a slightly warmer pink, darker and slightly more saturated as well. This helps darkening the half of the face that doesn't see direct light, keeping in mind that it's underwater, so the light would be much more diffused and less strong anyway. For a second pass, I use another darker pink, this time not going as wide as previously, rather focusing on occlusion shadows. And a bit more, but it's mainly used to darken parts like the eye holes and the ridge of the nostrils, etc. For a third pass, I'll go much thinner and just draw with an even darker pink where flesh folds, for example the lower eyelids and such. And with that, I am pretty happy with the face. It's still very pink, but I'll add green and blue tones later when I work on the background to make it more coherent. Now it's time to shade the body. I'm basically using the same technique I did with the face, this time going even darker. I'm focusing on making the light bounce off the top of the fish body and add more accent when it folds around the face, as if the face was strongly encased in the body of the fish. To break the simplicity of the color pattern a little bit, I will turn the different fins and flaps a shade of red. One very cool trick to imply texture on the fish and make it look less matte is to make small circles on one area where the light hits. You can offset the dots so that the different layers of color mix differently, and from afar it looks more textured, like scales. You just have to make bumps apparent in the right place for your brain to assume that the entire thing follows the same texture. Making the fish less matte in texture is also very important, as we are talking about a very slimy creature in water. There will be strong highlights rather than diffuse light all over it. Same will apply for the face, since, again, we're underwater. For now, we can move on to the lineless background. I am again using the trick of using a Gaussian blur to smooth everything, as you would with a short depth of focus on a camera. The only clear thing in the overall blur is the fish. That doesn't mean the background has to be overly simplistic. The very back is very simple, but at the front I can be a bit more precise with the shapes, the shadows, etc. to make sure that it is still registered as being seafloor by your eyes. Now that I have a good layout for the background, I can also blend it with the fish a bit more, to have them part of the same picture without a doubt. I add the yellowish green on the forehead of the face, according to the light rays behind the fish, but I also add green under the chin and on the belly, as per the reflection of the light of the seafloor. Similarly, I add a shadow directly under the fish, very soft but it's still there. And finally, for a great touch, I add a bit of pink and purple to the background, as if the fish itself would be reflected onto it. That is where I'll leave this illustration, I think. I don't necessarily have a story for that one, but the possibilities are definitely endless. Why is there a fish with a human face? Is it normal? Honestly, I simply thought it was funny to add a face to a fish, but feel free to come up with a story of your own in the comments below. Like the video if you enjoyed watching this strange fish come to life, and you can also tell me suggestions of what you want to see me draw next. That's what the comments are for. I am very interested to know too if you prefer mixing stories with digital art or if you are more focused on the tutorial aspect of these videos. I have plenty of things to learn with you and also so many stories to share. Subscribe to see what I can come up with in the future, of course, and check the description for links to my social media where I upload a ton of art regularly. I'm Detroit, I hope you like your new fish friend and I'll see you soon. Bye!